Do the countdown. Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And our topics for tonight are geopolitics, and Ansarallah, and U.S. complicity. The name Ansarallah is the formal name of the group, but known as the Houthis, who right now are the controlling political group inside, of Yemen. And of course, they have been tying shipping up into knots, in the Red Sea, and having a terrific impact on the crisis in Israel and Gaza as a result. So, this is one of two shows on international relations I'm going to do this week. The second will be tomorrow night, and I'll be doing two Dump the Corruption shows on Thursday and Friday. So this week, at least, I will not be doing a neoliberalism show in order to put in the international relations show. So I'll begin with one of the two posts. I have from thecradle.co. This first one is entitled, How Gaza is Impacting the Great Power Standoff. While China-led multipolarity has accelerated the decline of the American era, the war in Gaza may end it altogether. It's as important as that. This article is by Mohammed Hassan Swaidan. I wrote this on January 24th, 2024. There's a picture of Xi Jinping, of course, the president of China. What is unfolding today in West Asia, the Gaza war and its regional expansion, cannot be viewed separately from the international transformations that have grown in momentum over the past few years. Today, the transition to multipolarity is the underlying factor shaping decisions and policies of most countries, particularly those of the great powers. I've expanded the type some so you can see it better. The timing of Israel's devastating military assault on Gaza coincides with heightened U.S. attention on its great power competition for Washington. This conflict has much wider geopolitical significance beyond West Asia. In this context, the United States has assumed and will continue to play a pivotal role in Gaza and its environs, unlike its powerful peers in China and Russia. According to statistics published by the China Society for Human Rights Studies, the United States has initiated 201 of the 248 armed conflicts that took place since the end of World War II, often engaging in these wars via U.S.-led alliances and or proxies. Here's a little chart. In the first column, it gives the number of coalition countries. In the second column, the year, and in the third column, it identifies the war. There was a coalition put together by the United States of 38 countries, including 9 in West Asia, during 1990 to prosecute the Gulf War. Then in 2001, there was a coalition of 42 countries, including 2 in West Asia. And the war was the Afghanistan war. In 2003, there was a coalition of 48 countries for conducting the Iraq war. In 2014, there was a coalition of 13 countries, including 4 in West Asia. That was the Syria war. In 2015, there was a coalition of 9 countries, the majority of whom were in West Asia. And this was for the U.S.-backed war in Yemen. These are the most prominent wars led or supported by the United States in West Asia since 1990. For decades, Washington has led these conflicts by very ably forming, then leading and directing broad alliances to achieve its political and military objectives. Hello, Dee.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine. This is the first of 2 streams on international relations I'm doing this week. The title of this stream is Geopolitics, in Ansarallah. Hi, Steve Wolfbrandt, how you doing? And it's also going to deal with U.S. complicity, in Gaza. I'm going through the first of 3 articles. The title of that article is How Gaza is Impacting the Great Power Standoff, and it's from thecradle.co. The article is from Mohammed Hassan Swaidan. It was done on January 24th. And I've just presented a table showing the coalition wars from 1990 to 2015. The coalitions were organized by the United States. These wars included the Gulf War, the Afghanistan War, the Iraq War, the Syria War, and the Yemen War. The U.S.-backed by Yemen War, where the Saudis were our proxies in that war. For decades, Washington has led these conflicts by very ably forming, then leading and directing broad alliances to achieve its political and military objectives. But that ability notably shifted in December 2023, signaling a sharp decline in this capability. In response to Yemen's Ansarallah aligned armed forces Red Sea blockade of Israeli linked vessels, the U.S. Department of Defense announced the formation of, quote, Operation Guardian of Prosperity to uphold the foundational principle of freedom of navigation, unquote, in those waters. Seems to me it was to uphold the principle of supporting the Israelis in whatever they want to do. That's what it was really about. Initially consisting of a coalition of 10 countries, most of them insignificant partners of the United States. Probably the only significant partner of the United States is the UK. And these days, the UK is barely significant. Anyway, is this about protecting Israel or maintaining the maritime dominance of the United States? The coalition proved shaky from the get-go, with only the US and Britain actively involved in military strikes on Yemen. The reluctance of key European countries, France, Spain, and Italy, to join the naval alliance indicated a growing skepticism among the U.S.'s traditional partners, both Western and West Asian, about Washington's commitment and capability to defend its allies in any impactful way. Again, excuse me. Interestingly, more than 8 further countries reportedly joined the coalition, but demanded anonymity, given the potential political fallout from associating with Washington and Tel Aviv. That's interesting. They demanded anonymity.
Yeah.
Crucially, the Pentagon's stated purpose of securing navigation in the Red Sea does not align with the actual threat presented, revealing ulterior motives behind the U.S. actions. The Yemenis have repeatedly confirmed that they only intend to inhibit the passage of Israeli owned or destined vessels and that all other ships are free to pass. In
Mm-hmm.
short, the US UK led coalition is acting as a naval arm for Israeli military forces, seeking specifically to ensure unimpeded access for ships adding to Israeli ports via the Bab al Mandab Strait. That's not a position many other states will get behind if they want to maintain freedom of transport for their own shipping vessels. Ultimately, the American show of force in these waterways seeks to consolidate U.S. naval dominance, which war-torn Yemen, West Asia's poorest countries, has contested. As outlined in the National Security Strategy for 2022, the U.S., quote, will not allow foreign or regional powers to jeopardize freedom of navigation through the Middle East's West Asia waterways, including the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab al Mandab, nor tolerate efforts by any country to dominate another or the region through military buildups, incursions, or threats, unquote. According to media reports, following massive U.S. airstrikes against Iraqi targets on the 23rd of January, Iraqi resistance factions will now also follow Yemen's suit by implementing a blockade of Israeli ports in the Mediterranean Sea. That's interesting. Current events are spiraling out of Washington's control as onlookers increasingly question the utility and competence of U.S. naval leadership in the world's important waterways. And equally, there is recognition that other formidable forces and states have emerged, challenging U.S. control over key global straits. In the words of British politician and writer Walter Raleigh, quote, who rules the seas rules the world, unquote. Under Sana's watch, the U.S. no longer can claim rule over the Red Sea or even its adjacent waterways. Great power competition amid the Gaza war. The current scenario in West Asia, particularly Al-Aqsa flood and the Gaza war that followed, coincides with a shift in Washington's focus toward competition with China and its proxy war against Russia and Ukraine, as outlined in the U.S. intelligence community's annual threat assessment last year. This transition has already affected strategic goals, leading to a sharp decline in Western support, and especially from the U.S. for Ukraine. The Biden administration faced challenges in securing congressional approval for a new aid package for Kyiv, which directly competed for dollars against Tel Aviv's military campaign in Gaza. Not only for dollars, competed for ammunition against Tel Aviv's military campaign in Gaza. We have to remember that the U.S. ran out of 155 shells, millimeter shells, for Kyiv, and sent them cluster munitions instead, which of course are forbidden to use according to international law. So it shipped those arms to Kyiv for its use, implicating them in violations of international law, while it saved the 155 millimeter ammunition for Israel. Anyway, money spent in the year 2023, $6,975 million in the first quarter. This is aid that was paid to Ukraine in 2023 as under presidential withdrawal powers. In the second quarter, well, I guess I'll translate this into billions of dollars. It's more understandable. $6.975 billion in the first quarter, $2.625 billion in the second quarter, $2.150 billion in the third quarter of U.S. aid to Ukraine, $1.2 million in the fourth quarter to Ukraine. Despite assurances from Western leaders during visits to Ukraine in October, their statements came without tangible material support, leaving President Volodymyr Zelensky in the proverbial dust. Quite unexpectedly, China has emerged as a potential peacemaker in this European conflict, with Kyiv openly requesting Beijing's involvement in mediation talks, and the U.S. itself open to mediation by the Chinese to mitigate the escalation in West Asia. International leaders visit Ukraine to demonstrate support. Reading from the bottom up. October 22nd, on October 22nd, there were 6 leaders who visited. I'm sorry, in October 2022, there were 6 leaders who visited. In November of 2022, there were 18 leaders who visited. In December 2022, there were, looks like, maybe 2 leaders who visited. In January 23, there were 7 or 8 leaders who visited. In February 2023, there were, can I get an actual number here? No. It looks like there were 17 leaders who visited. In March 23, there were 15 leaders who visited. In April 23, there were 7 leaders who visited. These are my estimates from the chart. In May 23, looks like there were 3 leaders who visited. In June 2023, there were, gotta read the chart at the bottom. it looks like there were 12 leaders who visited in July 23rd. Looks like 4 leaders visited in August of 2023. Looks like 6 leaders September 23rd. It looks like there were 9 leaders in October 2023. Wow, there were lots of leaders visiting. Maybe 32 leaders were visiting in October 2023, but they left very little money behind. The Chinese are well aware that there are no simple face-saving exits for the U.S. from the Gaza war. It has championed that the metamorphosis of the conflict into a regional one mires the U.S. deeper into West Asia and away from the Asia Pacific. Although China seeks to increase its presence in West Asia, it is very careful not to bog itself down in the region's many issues. But Washington's request that Beijing use its influence to sway Iran from escalating conflict makes clear that the U.S. is no longer, quote, the biggest power, unquote, in the region. Why Israel opposes multipolarity. Following Operation Al-Aqsa flood, U.S. financial and military support for Israel has reached a critical stage, presenting 2 options for Washington. The first involves imposing some control on Israeli actions, given that the war's timing has been unfavorable to U.S. Strategic interests, particularly in a crucial election year. The second option favored by the Washington elite is to continue its unwavering support to Tel Aviv, even at the risk of damage to its global image, which, by the way, is certainly occurring as we speak. Sustained global outrage over the Gaza war, coupled with a landmark genocide case filed against Israel at the International Court of Justice, shows that Washington's ability to cover for Israel is diminishing rapidly. Again, this reflects the global shift in the balance of power toward multipolarity, which is marked by the widespread decline of American influence. Truer words were never spoken. But the U.S. support for the Gaza genocide has had dramatic domestic repercussions too. Polls show a major shift in the attitudes of young Americans, especially university youth, who will make up the ranks of America's future leaders. Well, they will, but of course, as people grow older, their attitudes tend to change. We have to make that point because it's just the truth. Okay. A Harvard-Harris poll published on the 17th of January reveals that 46% of respondents aged 18 to 24 believe that Hamas actions on the 7th of October can be justified because of the injustice to which the Palestinians are subjected. The same poll shows that 43% of the same group support Hamas in this war, and that 57% believe Israel is carrying out massacres in Gaza. The most staggering poll result of all, though, has to be the one in December conducted by the same pollsters, in which 51% of young Americans believe a final solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is for Israel to end and be given to Hamas and the Palestinians. Oh, that's a big result. While Israel remains a direct U.S. interest in West Asia, Washington's commitment to Tel Aviv's security has already become a growing burden and increasingly difficult to justify. As the region's axis of resistance expands its battle with Israel on new multiple front lines, the U.S. will need to allocate ever-expanding resources and focus on matching its international rivals in further flung geographies. And here we have to make the obvious point that right now the United States is close to being out of ammunition. it doesn't have the military wherewithal to pursue actions in other areas of the world and still defend Israel. And its capacity to defend Israel is being stretched, as well. And this is not a matter, of money. Uh, in other words, the United States can come up with $61 billion for Ukraine to continue to support its war effort. But the fact remains that it won't be possible for the Ukrainians to spend that $61 million on war material, because the war material is not available from the European powers in the United States. The factories don't exist to produce the kind of war material that's needed to pursue the Ukraine war and to support the Israelis in their Gaza war as well. Anyway, going on with the final paragraph of the article, Ukraine was a test run compared to this Gaza war and the immense direct toll it is taking on U.S. alliances, domestic politics, and the American image. The American image globally. For Israel, this presents an existential crisis beyond measure, as Washington is forced to compete with other great powers, none of whom are ideologically driven to support Zionism as part of their foreign policies. I think that was a great piece of analysis. I introduced some commentary while I was doing it, of course, to enhance some of the points Kay had made, but I think it was right on in outlining the impact of the great power standoff and the effect that it's having on the war, in Gaza, and will continue to have, but not only on the war in Gaza, but on the possibility of U.S. activity in other spheres where it wants to be active, such as Ukraine and in the Pacific. So I think this is a very important piece, and I wanted to outline its importance for you. Dee, any commentary on this?
You can continue on. I don't think I have too much to say.
Okay, the next article, hang on a second. Is also from thecradle.co. And this one is from one of our all-time favorites here, Pepe Escobar. Pepe, who has a wonderful way with words, coupled with excellent cave analysis, entitles this one, How Yemen's, quote, asabiya, unquote, is reshaping geopolitics. The Arabic word asabiya, or, quote, social solidarity, unquote, is a soundbite in the West, but taken very seriously by the globe's new contenders, China, Russia, and Iran. It is Yemen, however, that is mainstreaming the idea by sacrificing everything for the world's collective morality in a bid to end the genocide, in Gaza. This was written by Pepe on January 25th, 2024, and that graphic is very, very interesting. The arms and the planes and the Palestinian flag, what I think is the Ansarallah flag on your right, in the photo. Obviously, those are members of the armed forces of the resistance. And that part of the graphic is over the ocean, showing a U.S. task force uh, trying to counter the effects of Ansarallah in the Red Sea. Quote, when there is a general change of conditions, it is as if the entire creation had changed and the whole world been altered, as if it were a new and repeated creation, a world brought into existence, anew. This is a quote from Ibn Khaldun. Yemen's Ansarallah resistance forces have made it very clear, right from the start, that they set up a blockade in the Bab el Mandeb and the southern Red Sea only against Israeli owned or destined shipping vessels. Their single objective was and remains to stop the Gaza genocide perpetrated by the Israeli biblical psychopathy. Psychopathy. Yes, it is psychopathy. The Israeli biblical psychopathy. The psychopathy of Daniela Weiss that we covered, in D's show today. She is certainly guilty of biblical psychopathy, as is
Mhm.
Ben Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. As a response to a morally based call to end human genocide, the United States, masters of the global war of terror, and Pepe here, I don't know if I'm, uh, yes, I am sharing this. You'll notice in the text, the global war of terror. Normally, the global war on terror is what is spoken of, but Pepe views it as the global war of terror being conducted by the United States. And he does this simply by putting the of, in italics. Predictively redesignated Yemen's Houthis as a, quote, terrorist organization, unquote, launched the serial bombardment of underground Ansar Allah military installations, assuming U.S. intel knows where they are,
Mhm.
cobbled together a mini coalition of the willing that includes its UK, Canadian, Australian, Dutch, and Bahraini vassals. Without missing a beat, Yemen's parliament declared the US and UK government's, quote, global terrorist networks, unquote. Now let's talk strategy. With a single move, the Yemeni resistance seized the strategic advantage by de facto controlling a key geoeconomic bottleneck, the Bab al Mandeb. Hence, they can inflict serious trouble on sectors of global supply chains, trade, and finance. And Ansarallah has the potential to double down if need be. Persian Gulf traders off the record have confirmed insistent chatter that Yemen may consider imposing a so-called Al-Aqsa Triangle, aptly named after the 7th of October Palestinian resistance operation aimed at destroying the Israeli military's Gaza division and taking captives as leverage in a prisoner's swap deal. Such a move would mean selectively blocking not only the Bab el Mandeb and the Red Sea route to the Suez Canal, but also the Strait of Hormuz, cutting off oil and gas deliveries to Israel from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, although the top oil suppliers to Israel are in fact Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. These Yemenis are afraid of nothing. Were they able to impose the triangle, in this case only with direct Iranian involvement, That would represent the U.S. assassinated Quds Force General Qasem Soleimani's grand design on
Mhm.
cosmic steroids. This plan holds the realistic potential of finally bringing down the pyramid of hundreds of trillions of dollars in derivatives and consequently the whole Western financial system. Wow, what an idea. And yet, even as Yemen controls the Red Sea and Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, Al Aqsa Triangle remains just a working hypothesis. Welcome to the hegemon's blockade. With a simple, clear strategy, the Houthis perfectly understood that the deeper they draw, the strategy deprived Americans. Yeah, this is a wonderful slam at the United States for
Mhm.
its seeming inability to conduct any reasonable and reasonably successful strategy in foreign policy in recent years. They draw the strategy deprived Americans into the West Asian geopolitical swamp in a sort of, quote, undeclared war, unquote, mode. The more they're able to inflict serious pain on the global economy, which the global South will blame on the hegemon. Today, Red Sea shipping traffic has plunged in half compared to the summer of 2023. Supply chains are wobbly. Ships carrying food are forced to circumnavigate Africa and risk delivering cargo after its expiry date. It's amazing. Predictably, inflation across the vast EU agricultural sphere worth 70 billion euros is rising fast. Yet never underestimate a cornered empire. Western based insurance giants perfectly understood the rules of Ansarallah's limited blockade. Russian and Chinese ships, for instance, have free passage to the Red Sea. Global insurers have only refused to cover US, UK, and Israeli ships, exactly as the Yemenis intended. So the US predictably changed, the narrative into a big fat lie. Quote, Ansarallah is attacking the global economy, unquote. Washington turbocharged sanctions. Not a big deal, as the Yemeni resistance uses Islamic financing. Increased the bombing, and in the name of sacrosanct, quote, freedom of navigation, unquote, always applied selectively, placed its bets on the, quote, international community, unquote, including leaders of the global south begging for mercy, as in, please keep the shipping lanes open. The goal of the new reframed American deceit is to elbow the global south into ditching its support for Ansar Allah's strategy. This is just brilliant analysis. Pay attention to this crucial U.S. sleight of hand, because from now on, in a new perverse twist of Operation Genocide Protection, it is Washington that will be blockading the Red Sea for the entire world. Washington itself, mind you, will be spared. U.S. shipping depends on Pacific trade routes, not West Asian ones. This will ratchet up the pain on Asian customers and especially on Europe's economy, which already took the heaviest blows from Ukraine associated Russian energy sanctions. As Michael Hudson, the wonderful economist, who, by the way, is an MMTer himself, as he has often said, as Michael Hudson has interpreted it, there is a strong possibility that, the neocons in charge of U.S. foreign policy actually want, italics mine, says Pepe, to have Yemen and Iran implement the Al Aqsa Triangle. Quote, it will be the main energy buyers in Asia, China, and other countries that are going to be hurt, and that will give the United States even more power to control the oil supply of the world as a bargaining chip in trying to renegotiate this new international order, unquote. That, in fact, is the classic empire of chaos type of modus operandi. Calling attention to, quote, our people in Gaza, unquote, there is no solid evidence the Pentagon has the slightest clue about what its tomahawks are hitting in Yemen. That's, the tomahawk missiles. Even several hundred missiles won't change a thing on Ansarallah, which has already endured 8 years of nonstop U.S., UK, Saudi, and Emirati firepower, and basically won, will not relent today over a few missile strikes. Even the proverbial, quote, unnamed officials, unquote, informed, the New York Times that, quote, locating the Houthi targets has proven more difficult than expected, unquote, essentially because of lousy U.S. intel on Yemeni, quote, air defense command centers, ammunition depots, and drone and missile storage and production facilities, unquote. It's quite enlightening to listen to how Yemeni Prime Minister Abdul Aziz bin Salah Habtour frames Ansarallah's Israel blockade initiative decision as, quote, based on humanitarian, religious, and moral aspects, unquote. He refers crucially to, quote, our people in Gaza, unquote, and the overall vision, he reminds us, quote, stems from the vision of the axis of resistance, unquote. It is a reference smart onlookers will recognize, and as General Soleimani's everlasting legacy, with a keen historical sense. From the creation of Israel to the Suez Crisis and the Vietnam War, the Yemeni Prime Minister recalls how, quote, Alexander the Great reached the shores of Aden and Socotra Island but was defeated. Invaders tried to occupy the capital of the historical state of Sheba and failed. How many countries throughout history have tried to occupy the west coast of Yemen and failed, including Britain, unquote. It is absolutely impossible for the West and even the global majority to understand, the Yemeni mindset without learning a few facts from the angel of history. Is Pepe the angel of history? I wonder. So let's go back to the 14th century universal history master Ibn Khaldun, the author of the Muqaddimah. Ibn Khaldun cracks the Ansarallah code. Ibn Khaldun's family was a contemporary to the rise of the Arab Empire, on the move alongside the first armies of Islam in the 7th century, from the austere beauty of the Hadramawti valleys in what is now southern Yemen all the way to the Euphrates. Ibn Khaldun, crucially, was a precursor of Kant, Immanuel Kant, the European moral philosopher, of course, who offered the brilliant insight that, quote, geography lies at the basis of history, unquote. And he read the 12th century Andalusian philosophy master Averroes, as well as other writers exposed to Plato's works, and understood how the latter referred to the moral strength of, quote, the first people, unquote, in a Timaeus in 360 BC. Yes, this boils down to, quote, moral strength for the West, a mere soundbite. For the East, an essential philosophy. Ibn Khaldun grasped how civilization began and was constantly renewed by people with natural goodness and energy, people who understood and respected the natural world, who lived a light, united by blood or brought together by a shared revolutionary idea or religious drive. Ibn Khaldun defined asabiya as this force that binds people together. Like so many words in Arabic, asabiya exhibits a range of diverse, loosely connected meanings. Arguably, most relevant is esprit de corps, team spirit, and tribal solidarity, just as Ansar Allah exhibits, as Ibn Khaldun demonstrates, when the power of Asabiya is fully harnessed, reaching way beyond the tribe. It becomes more powerful than the sum of its individual parts and become a catalyst to reshape history, to make or break empires, to encourage civilizations or force them to collapse. We are definitely living an Asabiya moment brought about by the Yemeni resistance moral strength, solid as a rock. The Ansarallah innately understood the threat of eschatological Zionism, which happens to mirror the Christian Crusades, a millennium ago. And they are virtually the only ones in practical terms trying to stop it. Now, as an extra bonus, they are exposing the plutocratic hegemon once again as bombers of Yemen, the poorest Arab nation state where at least half the population remains, quote, food insecure, unquote. But Ansarallah is not heavy weapons free like the Pashtun Mujahideen who humiliated NATO in Afghanistan. Their anti-ship cruise missiles include the Syad and the Quds ZO, range up to 800 kilometers, and the Al-Mandab 2 range up to 300 kilometers. Their anti-ship ballistic missiles include the Tanqil, range up to 500 kilometers, the Asef range up to 450 kilometers, and the Al-Bar al-Amur range up to 200 kilometers. That covers the southern part of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, but not, for instance, the islands of the Socotra archipelago. Accounting for roughly one-third of the country's population, Yemen's Houthis, who form the backbone of the Ansarallah resistance, do have their internal agenda, gaining fair representation in governments. They launched Yemen's Arab Spring, protecting their Zaidi, neither Shia nor Sunni faith, fighting for the autonomy of the Sada governorate, and working for the revival of the Zaydi imamate, which was up and running before the 1962 revolution. Now they're making their mark on the big picture. It's no wonder Ansarallah fiercely fights the hegemon's vassal Arabs, especially those who signed a deal to normalize relations with Israel under the Trump administration. The Saudi Emirati war on Yemen, with the hegemon, quote, leading from behind, unquote, was a quagmire that cost Riyadh at least $6 billion a month for 7 years. My God. It ended with a wobbly 2022 truce and a de facto Ansarallah victory. The signed peace agreement, it should be noted, has been disallowed by the US, despite Saudi efforts to seal a deal. Now, Ansarallah is turning geopolitics and geoeconomics upside down with not just a few missiles and drones, but also oceans of craftiness and strategic strategic acumen. To invoke Chinese wisdom, picture a single rock changing the course of a stream, which then changes the course of a mighty river. Epigones of Diogenes can always remark, half in jest, that the Russia-China-Iran strategic partnership may have contributed with their own well-placed rocks in this path to a more equitable order. That's the beauty of it. We may not be able to see these rocks, only the effects they cause. What we do see, though, is the Yemeni resistance, solid as a rock. The record shows the hegemon once again reverting to autopilot mode. Bomb, bomb, bomb. And in this particular case, to bomb is to redirect the narrative from a genocide committed in real time by Israel, the empire's aircraft carrier in West Asia. Still, Ansarallah can always increase the pressure by sticking firmly to its narrative and driven by the power of Asabiya, delivered to the hegemon a second Afghanistan, compared to which Iraq and Syria would look like a weekend at Disneyland. And that's the end of that extremely brilliant article. That this article is just bursting with history and cultural knowledge of the area and research. I don't know how long it took Pepe to write this article, but we all benefit from its brilliant strategic insights, brilliant detail, masterful detail. And its mastery of the English language, as a literary tool. Its knowledge of history. This article fires on all cylinders and gives us wonderful understanding of what Ansarallah is doing and what the implications of what it's doing are likely to be from a geopolitical and geoeconomic standpoint. Okay, D, any comments on this wonderful article?
I thought it was very good, and I have to say he was right when he talked about not having a clue. The U.S. has no clue what's going on in Gaza. They really,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, this article just makes the United States and its allies look like fools. Just utter and complete fools. And it makes it look like, the attempt to defend Israel and to safeguard Israel and to strengthen Israel is just doomed, to failure.
oh, it is.
Because the blocking of the Red Sea is creating for Israel tremendous damage to the economy of Israel. And the United States may not be able to prop it up
No,
sufficiently.
and they've got a problem with the war and so many reservists over in Gaza.
The longer the war goes on, the more economic chaos there will be, in Israel.
And then they've got the northern front going on with Lebanon.
Yes. Oh, by the way, 100,000 people in the northern part of Israel are still away from their homes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a terrible experience for them. The whole dream of Israeli security has been destroyed, not only by Hamas, but also by the axis of resistance, including Ansarallah, and the various measures that it has taken in order to weaken Israel. And the axis of resistance hasn't even pulled out its big guns yet.
No. And and this has been years and years of building up. We've watched the settler movement. We've been watching what's been going on in the West Bank, and everything that was going has it for years going on in Gaza. Things build up.
Things build up, and defenses build up too, and
Mhm.
plans to counter the terrible things that Israel has been doing are developed and worked on over a period of time until those plans work.
Mhm.
The October 7th military operation by Hamas was a brilliant military operation, and it was extremely successful. Okay, it looks like there is going to be a hostage trade. There's news of one being worked out, okay, in Gaza. It looks like Israel will have to give up thousands of its hostages to get the Israeli hostages back. Uh, that will be a big victory for Hamas. Of course, the invasion itself was a big victory for Hamas. Uh, to have the issue of the Palestinian state back on the table as a serious alternative is a great victory for Hamas also.
Oh, definitely. And
So,
you have Netanyahu and the far right. They're just angry about all this.
yes, and they're on the ropes.
Yeah.
They
Uh,
are on the ropes.
And you're clearly seeing that they don't care about the hostages because as long as they keep saying they're not content with a deal, it means they're really not content with having the hostages released.
Okay, so let's get to the third piece for tonight. I do want to mention at this point the stream for tomorrow, okay, at 9 o'clock, carries on with the analysis started in this particular stream, but it will focus much more, okay, on the immediate impact of the issues raised by the decision of the International Court of Justice. Okay, while this one has concentrated more on the geopolitical background, okay, of everything and the impact, okay, of Ansarallah on that, okay, but also set against, okay, the backdrop of the new balance of power which exists in Asia
Mm.
and in West Asia. Okay, so I want you to keep that context, okay, in mind. Now I'm going to move to the of uh, third of our articles for tonight, which so far we have been not been given a lot of attention to, either in your show D, okay, or in mine. This piece was from Common Dreams, and it's about the court case here in the United States. U.S. court hears case alleging Biden complicit in Israel's genocide in Gaza. Quote, we are watching a genocide unfold in Gaza in real time, and despite the government's view that a U.S. court can do nothing about it, CCR, which is the Center for Constitutional Rights, and our clients argue that it certainly can and it absolutely must, unquote. Okay, said one advocate. This piece was written by Julia Conley on January 26, 2024, calling for an emergency injunction to stop the Biden administration from aiding Israel in its bombardment of Gaza, which has so far killed more than 26,000 people as of uh, January 26th, and pushed roughly 2 million more to the point of starvation. Human rights organizations and Palestinians in the U.S. on Friday took federal leaders to court to stop U.S., quote, complicity in the Israeli government's unfolding genocide, unquote. Now, what would be the basis for this, for people domestically taking, the U.S. to court? Well, it is the Genocide Convention and the fact that the United States is a signatory to the Genocide Convention. The Genocide Convention is a treaty that the U.S. has to adhere to. And what everybody has to understand as a backdrop of all this is that U.S. treaties, for as long as they last, are the law of the land here. And they trump everything except for the Constitution. Treaties have a primacy. They have a primacy over domestic law. As long as the treaties themselves are constitutional. If you want to challenge a treaty, you have to challenge it in U.S. court on the basis of the unconstitutionality of the treaty. Going on with the article. The U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California in Oakland held a hearing on the case in which the Center for Constitutional Rights, the CCR, is representing groups including Defense for Children International Palestine, DCIP, and Al-Haq in suing President Joe Biden, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. They forgot to sue Jake Sullivan, who's the White House Chief of Staff. The groups, joined by individual plaintiffs whose families in Gaza have been subjected to Israel's assault and decades of occupation, argue that the U.S. is violating domestic and international law and breaching the Genocide Convention, of which it is a signatory. The hearing was held hours after the International Court of Justice released its initial ruling in South Africa's case accusing Israel of genocide in Gaza. The ICJ found that Israel must, quote, take all measures within its power, unquote, to prevent genocide. Layla El-Haddad, one of the plaintiffs in the U.S. case, said the group entered the courtroom, quote, proud and hopeful, unquote, on the heels of the ICJ ruling. And Layla El-Haddad at Gazaman tweeted, on the heels of the ICJ ruling, we are on our way to U.S. federal court to hold the U.S. government accountable. We are proud and hopeful and here for our families who are being genocided with U.S. complicity. I believe the UD there is a misprint. I don't know if I'll play this. Let me see how long it is.
Wael, tell us how you're feeling as we're about to enter. Wael is one of the plaintiffs along with myself.
Feeling good, feeling very hopeful. But we come in today, we realize it's a historic moment, but our hearts and minds are with our families. We are here today, but our families still being subjected to unprecedented brutality. We think of them today, we speak on their behalf, and we're hopeful that a measure of justice will be seen today. Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Inshallah, for those that don't know, means God willing. The CCR reported that the court's live stream was at capacity during the hearing, Well, outside the courtroom, supporters painted Biden complicit in genocide and, quote, no bombs to Israel, unquote, on the streets. And Vince Warren tweeted, it's extraordinary. We at the CCR went into court this morning to argue the case. This painting wasn't there. Okay, this is a quote tweet of a tweet by Ashok Swain. While the court in Oakland hearing a case that accuses Biden for aiding genocide in Israel, pro-Palestine messages painted outside the courtroom. And this is a little video that I think we can play too. It's from Twitter. I don't know if you can see this or hear this, but
Yeah, I can see it.
yeah, we can see it. It says Biden complicit, okay, in genocide. You can't hear any sound from Twitter because it's buffering. But that was not there when they arrived for the court case, okay, in the morning. And it was painted, okay, on the street. Evidently, as the court hearing, okay, was going on. No bombs to Israel. That's very beautiful resistance. Quote, a recording of the hearing will be made available by the court in due course, unquote, said CCR. Dina Takruri of AJ Plus reported that in the, quote, unprecedented, unquote, hearing, a doctor testifying remotely from Rafah, Gaza, told the court that, quote, cases of childbirth in the streets are widespread at this time, unquote. Along with the relentless air and ground attacks by Israeli forces, Gazans have for nearly 4 months faced a near total blockade on Gaza, with aid deliveries severely curtailed by Israel. Roughly 90% of Gaza residents are now frequently going without any meals for at least a full day. South Africa's case at the ICJ outlined numerous statements of genocidal intent by top Israeli officials. Despite the mounting evidence of ethnic cleansing, the Biden administration has called South Africa's accusations, quote, meritless, unquote, and has continued to arm Israel without congressional approval. Our community mobilized to put Biden in power after former President Donald Trump, unquote, Basim Al-Kara, executive director, the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, CAIR in the Sacramento Valley, and another Palestinian American plaintiff testified at the hearing, quote, it hurts deeply, unquote. The plaintiffs plan to hold a post-hearing press conference. Quote, the takeaway from today's court hearing, unquote, said CCR Executive Director Vince Warren, is that we are watching a genocide unfold in Gaza in real time, and despite the government's view that a U.S. court can do nothing about it, CCR and our clients argue that it certainly can and it absolutely must, unquote. So that's the case. Of course, we don't know what the court is going to decide, but it looks to me like there is a legal basis for it because in supporting Israel, it looks to me like the U.S. is complicit in the genocide that is going on in Gaza right now, complicit in Israeli defiance of the decision of the International Court of Justice, and in its complicity, the United States is surely violating the treaty, the Genocide Convention. because one of the aspects of the treaty is that all parties of the treaty are to do everything they can to stop the genocidal violations going on wherever they were going on, in this case in Gaza. And the United States is instead doing all it can to support the Israeli genocidal acts. So the United States is violating treaty law. And what the people suing in this court want is for the court to order that the government stop violating treaty law, stop being complicit in the Israeli genocide. So, if this action is successful in the court, of course, it will probably go up to higher courts and will eventually end up in the Supreme Court. We don't know what will happen, but the position of treaty law in the courts of the United States is pretty sacred. So maybe we will get a surprising result from it. Okay, I certainly hope so. Before I go into the comments, okay, well, before I do that, have you got any comment, Dee, on that article?
Yes, and the one thing with this case too is the fact that you had people communicating and telling their stories that go back to the Nakba. So it was just something a lot of Americans haven't heard, and that
Yes,
has been
so
spread
that
out.
is very important and very dramatic.
So it's bringing forth history to the present day.
Yes, and it's very important for we Americans to understand that history,
Oh,
that at some level, okay, the Nakba has been going on continuously, okay, since 1948. Okay, the Nakba, of course, okay, is the catastrophe. What's referred to by the catastrophe is the expulsion of Palestinians by the Israelis from Palestine, starting in 1948, when 750,000 of the Palestinians fled their homes in fear of violence that was being perpetrated by the Israelis after the founding of the new state, okay, of Israel. So that was, okay, the Nakba then. That was the source, okay, of the refugee problem that we continue to see, okay, today. And the Nakba continued at low levels since that time, but in recent years it has heated up again as the right wing in Israel, the religious fanatics, the biblical fools, have gained political power and have gained the complicity of the Israeli states in their fascistic actions against, the Palestinians. So I wanted to say something about the show tomorrow, which continues with a lot, of this emphasis. It will be again, at 9 p.m. And what we're going to go over in this show is let me get there. Okay, we're going to be going over the dilemma of Joe Biden in relation to the Gaza genocide. in the wake of the ICJ orders. We're also going to go over an analysis from Truthout of what can be done now. What are the next steps following the ICJ order? The first article is by Phyllis Bennis, a great analyst of international relations. The second piece is from Marjorie Cohn, who is great as a legal analyst. And she will be looking at it from the point of view of international law. What can be done from the point of view of international law? And the final article that we'll be going over tomorrow night is a wonderful piece by Jeffrey Sachs, giving his take on the ICJ decision and what the meaning of that particular decision is. So tomorrow night's show is going to be a very important one. I hope to see you all here. What Jeff Sachs focuses on is what awaits Israel since the preliminary finding by the ICJ. What awaits them if they continue to tread the path that they are now on. And so that analysis by Jeffrey Sachs is a very important analysis, and we will be covering it tomorrow. So getting back to our show here tonight, I'm kind of looking for comments. I don't see many comments, except for the greetings, which surprises me because the pieces covered tonight were so good. One would think that they would elicit quite a bit of commentary. But I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you, Kay. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Dee, for joining us.
You're welcome. And I've noticed Tuesday nights, for some reason, they don't seem to be, popular nights with getting an audience.
The Tuesday nights seem to be popular nights for what?
No, we don't seem to be getting a big audience on Tuesday nights.
Oh, you think there's something about Tuesday night?
Yeah.
Well, if you're right, then maybe tomorrow night things will be better.
Yeah.
I hope. When Tuesday nights come around, I'm kind of raring to go, because I've, taken a couple of days off,
Yeah.
and I'm ready to rock and roll again on Tuesday night.
Yeah, because I wonder what else is showing on Tuesday night or what people are watching.
Yeah. Well, maybe the viewers on Twitter will be more active.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you, everybody. And will you have a show tomorrow night, Dee?
Yes, I'm having a show tomorrow night.
Okay. So Dee will have one at 8. And I will have one at 9, and I'll be covering the things I just spoke about.
Yes, and remember, if you're watching the show later on, to please hit the like button, subscribe, and share.
Yes, and please buy us some coffees. Buy me a coffee is flashing across the screen, at the bottom. And D is at buymeacoffee.com/D Piers, all one word, right?
Yes.
If you'd like to buy D, a coffee. And D also has her Cash App. Would you like to give the Cash App?
Yeah, the Cash App is Dolores Piers. Dollores. Piers.
And I have my patreon.com, which is up close to my face on the screen. Patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. So there we are. Again, thank you very much for coming. And we will see you tomorrow.
Yes, good night and good night, Bonnie.
Good night.
Yes,
Good
see you
night.
tomorrow.
We may have flurries in an hour.